Hello, learners, and welcome to the 48th lecture in this NPTEL course on 20th century poetry. We have been discussing the life and work of Elizabeth Bishop. In the previous lecture, I began reading through the first poem in Bishop's first collection, North and South, the poem titled The Map. The first stanza began with the staging. It staged a poet observing a map and the poet's mind wandering to a lot of different kinds of ideas. What exactly is the relationship between land and water? Not just land and water as it appears on the map, as different shades of green and blue, but land and water in real life. And also, what is the relationship between how the map looks and what kind of relationship exists between actual land and water? And then the poet furthers this conversation by giving us more instances. The speaker says, "The shadow of Newfoundland lies flat and still, Labrador's yellow, where the moony Eskimo has oiled it. We can stroke these lovely bays under a glass as if they were expected to blossom, or as if to provide a clean cage for invisible fish. The names of seashore towns run out to sea. The names of cities cross the neighboring mountains. The printer here experiencing the same excitement as when emotion too far exceeds its cause. These peninsulas take the water between thumb and finger like women feeling for the smoothness of yard goods." So, a very interesting set of thoughts. Let us go over them carefully. Newfoundland and Labrador are locations on the eastern coast, up the very north in the US, near the Canada border. These are locations where the North American coast borders the Atlantic Ocean. And the poet is observing the color with which these locations have been shaded on the map. Labrador's yellow, where the moony Eskimo has oiled it, right? So the poet is imagining a physical reason for why the map maker has printed or used certain colors. The poet says, "We can stroke these lovely bays under a glass as if they were expected to blossom." So the color suggests that there is something in the geographical aspect which can give rise to certain forms of life. Just like certain seeds or certain parts of plants can be stroked under a glass, if given the right kind of heat and moisture, they would sprout life. In the same way, these colors are triggering in the poet's mind thoughts of possible life. The names of seashore towns run out to sea, names of cities across the neighboring mountains. So the printer here has gotten too excited. The name is too big and cannot be contained in the map. The poet thinks that it is because of the printer's excitement that the map looks in a certain way. And then the poet remembers, or juxtaposes rather, a very strange kind of image. The peninsula take the water between thumb and finger, right? So the peninsula is like a triangle. A peninsula, if one uses a textbook geography definition, it's a mass of land that's surrounded by water on three sides. It's a triangle. So the Indian subcontinent is a peninsula. The map is full of peninsulas. When the poet looks at a peninsula on a map, the poet thinks of a person's hand. The poet specifically thinks of not just a person's hand, but a very particular action. And the poet gives us this image a very detailed, vivid, and socially very specific image. Women feeling for the smoothness of yard goods. So it's describing an experience of people who have gone shopping. And this is common to many of us. It's not just women feeling for the smoothness of yard goods, but whoever goes shopping for fabrics. And this is what the word yard goods mean. When people shop for fabric, they sometimes hold a fabric between thumb and index finger and roll their fingers around, sort of like this. And it is this motion that the poet is describing as something which feels analogical and almost equivalent to the shape of the peninsula. Several things are being done here. The poet is asking us to think about a scene, a common action, and the poet is asking us to equate this with an image. The image of a peninsula on a map and the action of women feeling for the smoothness of yard goods. This is an instance of Elizabeth Bishop drawing an inspiration from the metaphysical poets, poets like John Donne, who Bishop has cited as among her strongest, most powerful sources of inspiration. Like the work of John Donne, which one contemporary poet described as an act of yoking together by violence disparate images. In this stanza also, there is some amount of violence, some amount of cognitive dissonance, because no one naturally associates these two images. And yet, the poet has made us feel that this unnatural juxtaposition is actually quite natural, or might be quite natural, if one trusts the formal smoothness, the linguistic elegance of this poem. Further, mapped waters are more quiet than the land is, lending the land with their waves' own conformation. And Norway's hair runs south in agitation, profiles investigate the sea where land is. Are they assigned, or can the countries pick their colors? What suits the character or the native waters best? Topography displays no favorites. Norths are as near as west. More delicate than the historians are the map makers' colors. So several comparisons are being made. The first comparison is between mapped waters than the mapped land. So in reality, water is not quiet. Water is loud. Water is energetic and violent and angry. Land is at the mercy of water. But in the map, in the visual language of the map, water bodies are quiet. There is a muted dimension to the visual representation of water on a map. This strikes the poet as being quite strange, because in reality, water is not mute. There's nothing mute about water. Water is in fact more loud and aggressive than land. So this is a way in which the map maker's perspective as humans and the map maker's existential interest in land is betrayed in the kind of colors that the map uses. So human beings, those of us who make maps, those of us who live on this earth and study the earth, we have an existential interest in maintaining land. If the oceans were to rise, as they are rising in a time of global warming, if the oceans were to rise, we would all die. We would be extinct as a human species. And so we would like the land to remain stable. We would like to believe that the land is actually stable. We would like to believe that waters are quiet and stay beneath the land. It may or may not be true, but the maps that we draw betray this interest that we have. And the poet is able to expose and see through this interest and this betrayal, because the poet has a very active, sensitive, attuned imagination. The poet focuses on the map and notices that what the map is describing or asking us to accept as true is actually a little bit different. In reality, things are a little bit different. The poet has arrived at this realization by focusing with a great deal of attention and empathy on the map. Mapped waters lend the land their waves' own conformation. So, the story that the map tells about land and water is that the water has subsided and allowed the land to reign supreme. Further, the poet asks rather, can countries pick their colors? Right? Different countries are often painted or shaded in different colors on a map. It's a very simple question that betrays a childlike curiosity. And further, the poet wonders what suits the character or the native waters best. So, can countries pick their own colors, or can countries pick what shade of blue is used to describe the water bodies in and around their borders? Because native waters are different. Water bodies are experienced differently by people in different countries. These water bodies are also objectively, geographically and geologically speaking, different. Topography displays no favorites. Right? So, distance is measured objectively on a map, but distance is experienced subjectively in the lives of people. North is as near as west. Right? So, the distance between two places is fixed. Every map has a scale. Every map allows readers or users to approximate the distance between 2 points on the map by a mathematical calculation. Places that are 1 centimeter apart on a map may be 1 kilometer or 100 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers apart in real life. And this is called the key or the scale to a map. The poet here is observing that these calculations are often different from the experiential truth of space. The last line explains this. More delicate than the historians are the map makers' colors. So the historians might have a very fixed idea of what happened, but the map makers, they are like painters or they are like poets. They observe change, they observe history as occurring at the same time. Like painters and like poets, a map maker has the ability to undertake a horizontal view of change. With that, we can move to another poem, a classic in Bishop's very powerful oeuvre of writing. This is a poem that's titled Questions of Travel. Questions of Travel appeared in Geography 3, a late volume, a very, very masterful collection, also a very, very intimate collection. I use the words masterful and intimate deliberately. It is masterful because we see the poet writing with a great deal of precision and accomplishment. The poet has achieved maturity with regard to her theme as well as the style in which those themes are explored. It's also intimate because this is a collection which describes scenes from the poet's life with a kind of intimacy which was not seen earlier. The poet speaks about herself in the first person many times. The poet allows us to connect, in fact, invites us to connect the events described in the poem with events which involved the person, Elizabeth Bishop, who was born in the year 1911, the actual human being. Although such connection does not mean that the poems are a literal representation of the poet's life. Rather, they ask us to place the events from Bishop's life in an interpretive frame. These events exert an influence, they exert a powerful inspiration on the kind of words and writing that emerge from Bishop's pen. So, the first of these masterful and intimate poems from the collection Geography 3, which I will read, is titled Questions of Travel. Before I read this poem, I want to read a quote which Elizabeth Bishop admitted in her letters and journals as a thought that inspired her to write this poem. The sentence is a quote translated into English from the original French from Pascal's Pensées. Pascal writes, "The sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room." Now, let's pause for a moment and think about what exactly Pascal is saying. Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, writes that if only people could be satisfied, that is, content, with not doing something or with something, then people would learn to be happy. People are unhappy because, or human beings are unhappy because they don't know how to stay quietly in their room. And so instead, what do? Instead of staying quietly in their rooms, what do? People go out and travel. Now, travel would be no problem. It would create no problems if it were conducted in a non-intrusive manner. However, it is never done in a non-intrusive manner. In fact, travel often becomes quite intrusive. Travel takes a toll, not just on the people or the locations where one travels, but also on the person who's doing the traveling. These costs, these tolls, these unpleasant consequences, these unwanted consequences of travel are what Elizabeth Bishop writes about in this poem, which is titled Questions of Travel, and which I will now read. There are too many waterfalls here. The crowded streams hurry too rapidly down to the sea, and the pressure of so many clouds on the mountain tops make them spill over the sides in soft, slow motion, turning to waterfalls under our very eyes. So, the first 4 or 5 lines, they have a complaining tone. The perspective which we can guess is that of a person who is traveling, who has reached their destination, and having reached their destination has a lot of thoughts. What kind of thoughts are these? The person says, there are too many waterfalls here. The crowded streams hurry too rapidly. The pressure of so many clouds. So there is an excess. The reality of the place seems to not match or seems to exceed the standard or the expectations that the tourist or traveler had when they decided to visit this place. So they wanted waterfalls, they wanted streams, they wanted clouds on mountaintops. These are all attractive things. If you think of any travel magazine, travel website, travel brochure, travel is a big industry. People want to get away from their lives. People want to have a good time. People want to break the monotony of their professional, mundane, urban lives. People like to see natural beauties. So these images are featured in a lot of promotional content by companies, travel agencies, websites, airlines, who are trying to make a business, run a business by offering people a chance to travel. So obviously, whoever is speaking these lines has imagined or based on certain promotional content has seen images of waterfalls, mountaintops, clouds, etc. And then having seen these images, they took a decision. They decided to travel. But having reached their destination, they find that there is something wrong with these promised natural beauties. They are too excessive. They do not give the promised comfort or attraction that the traveler was expecting. And then what does the traveler do? Why they notice this? They mention that there is a gap between expectation and reality. But what does that gap do? What happens? Let us read further. For if those streaks, those mile-long shiny tear stains, aren't waterfalls yet, in a quick age or so, as ages go here, they probably will be. But if the streams and clouds keep traveling, the mountains look like the hulls of capsized ships, slime-hung and barnacled. Think of the long trip home. Should we have stayed at home and thought of here? Where should we be today? Is it right to be watching strangers in a play in this strangest of theaters? What childishness is it that while there's a breath of life in our bodies, we are determined to rush to see the sun the other way around, the tiniest green hummingbird in the world, to stare at some inexplicable old stonework, inexplicable and impenetrable at any view, instantly seen and always, always delightful? Oh, must we dream our dreams and have them too? And have we room for one more folded sunset, still quite warm? So this, the second stanza, sets the intellectual stakes very clearly. The intellectual stakes are the underlying assumptions which inspire this poem and which make it valuable, which ensure that these words will always be relevant. We will always need the poet to ask these questions to help us make sense of our own existence. So what is that question? After a brief conclusion to these reflections, the speaker decides that, okay, my expectations were unrealistic, but obviously they would be unrealistic because I formed those expectations from a distance without seeing this place. So obviously, streams, mountaintops, clouds, they're all changeable. They will change, and they are changing as I am traveling. So in the time that has passed between me seeing the images, planning the trip, and actually reaching the place, what I came to see has changed. Maybe I can perceive the change, maybe I cannot, but change is taking place and time is passing. This is the intellectual realization that the first stanza ends with. Time passes. Tourists often think that time passes only for them, that the destination of their visit, the object of their tourism, the commodity which they are buying, the image, pictures, selfies of them alongside monuments like the Taj Mahal, etc. That commodity, tourists often think, and businesses that sponsor these trips often think, these commodities are thought of as unchanging. But the reality that the tourist accepts in the first line of this poem is that time passes for everyone. And then this realization, the passage of time, that nothing remains the same. In the act of traveling, the tourist is producing a change in that which the tourist is wanting to see. So right now, we are living through a time when Europe is straining under the burden of travel. A lot of tourists, especially American, but not just American, from all over the world, are going to Europe to spend their summer vacations or to travel. The infrastructure, the people, the culture of Europe is straining under the weight of so much travel. This is a realization that the poet has come to, and then the poet uh, goes into another deeper set of questions. The dominant question in the second stanza is it right for us to undertake this travel? Is it ethically right? Right? Uh, is it practical? Is it logical? Is it intellectual? Right? Are we really smart people? Are we intelligent and um, smart and scientific? Or are we, in fact, childish and illogical and wasting our time? Right? Why should we rush around the world when the realities are the same all over the world? So, one reality is what? The sun sets and the sun rises. It's the same all over the world. But we get some pleasure when we see the picture of a sun setting in a different location. But when we get there, we find that more or less places are the same. More or less people are the same. So then why did we waste so much resource, not just money, but resource like fossil fuels, which are being burnt in airplanes as they carry people around? So was it really worth it? And if it was, what is the value of such travel? The things that we claim to see, the tiniest green hummingbird in the world, what's the point, right? And rather, the poet asks, wouldn't it be better if we stayed at home and thought of the place that we wanted to see instead of traveling there? In a way, that's what the poet has done. The poet, Elizabeth Bishop, writes about places. The poet is traveling without moving. The poet is undertaking travel through her imagination. In a way, the poet is doing what magazines like the National Geographic, TV channels like the Discovery Channel, uh, and other kinds of programming like Travel and Living. So, all travel shows, travel writing. What is all that? It is intellectual work undertaken by someone who has undertaken a trip. It is read by someone who has not undertaken that trip, but is able to undertake a version of that experience by reading the words of someone who has traveled. The poet is an extremely sensitive and empathetic incarnation of that reader, of that consumer of the National Geographic magazine, of the Discovery Channel. It is through such a sensitive consumption of these narratives that the poet is able to undertake a travel of her own, a travel without actually leaving her room or her desk, even. A travel that begins as soon as the poet begins writing or even thinking. So, for the poet, the traveling that is done by thinking is in many ways more sustainable, more ecological, more ethical than the travel that is undertaken by spending resources, burning fuel, spending money, etc. Why is that? It is because the intellectual payoff at the end of these kinds of travel are comparable. And the intellectual payoff that happens at the end of intellectual travel, as opposed to physical travel, is greater. Why? Because questions like this: what did we achieve by seeing the tiniest green hummingbird in the world? And what do we achieve by looking at historical monuments and artistic work, stonework, sculpture, which we don't have time to appreciate? We spend maybe half a minute on one sculpture or one artifact before we have to move on? Wouldn't it be better if instead of spending 1 hour in a museum, uh, passing by thousands of artifacts and not really learning much about them, wouldn't it be better if one stays and reads about these artifacts? So, intellectually, what is the payoff? And why do we need more sunsets? So, this is the intellectual messaging in the second stanza. Let us read one more stanza before we conclude. But surely it would have been a pity not to have seen the trees along this road really exaggerated in their beauty, not to have seen them gesturing like noble pantomimists, robed in pink, not to have had to stop for gas and heard the sad two-noted wooden tune of disparate wooden clogs carelessly clacking over a grease-stained filling station floor. In another country, the clogs would all be tested. Each pair there would have an identical pitch. A pity not to have heard the other, less primitive music of the fat brown bird who sings above the broken gasoline pump in a bamboo church of Jesuit Baroque. 3 towers, 5 silver crosses. So 2 images the poet offers us, which can only have been witnessed through travel. So now this stanza, the third stanza, offers a counter-argument. The poet in the second stanza asked, what's the point of travel? In the third stanza, the poet is saying, yes, there is some point. There are some things which cannot be replicated. Sure, superlative factoids like smallest bird, old historical sculptures, these can be studied in books and these can be read about at home. But encounters with people, encounters like the poet describes, hearing the sounds of 2 wooden clogs at a filling station, at a petrol pump, somewhere in Latin America, and Bishop experienced this in Brazil while driving. Encounters like the song of a bird over a church in or near a petrol pump in Jesuit Baroque. These encounters cannot be thought of, studied, even anticipated. So there is a great deal of value in travel, and this is what the poem is now going to struggle with. The poem will present 2 equally compelling arguments, and the poet will stage an experience in which the poet allows her mind to be pulled in contrary directions by equally compelling arguments. And the power of the poem is the equivalence and the judiciousness with which Elizabeth Bishop presents both of these views. We will conclude the discussion of this poem in the next lecture. Thank you.